Good evening and thank you for tuning in. I'm Daniel Che with this hour's latest. There's only one day remaining until families separated by the Korean War meet each other for the first time in 60 years. The 83 South Koreans who are scheduled to meet family members living in the north during the 5-day reunion event gathered near the inter-Korean border in Sokcho, Gangwon-do province this Wednesday afternoon for a final medical checkup and to receive instructions on how to conduct themselves in the communist state. They will cross the inter-Korean border on Thursday morning and head to Mount Kumgang resort where the reunions will be held. There are around 70,000 divided family members who are still on a waiting list for the government-arranged reunions. Telephone or letter exchanges are not allowed between the two Koreas. The White House has reiterated its condemnation of the human rights violation in North Korea in light of a new report by a UN panel. In a press briefing Tuesday, White House Press Secretary Jay Carney said the U.S. is extremely vocal and critical about the appalling conduct of the regime. The latest UN panel report on the human rights situation in the North defined rights abuses there as crimes against humanity. In contrast to the U.S. reaction, Beijing, Pyongyang's ally, said the UN's criticisms were unreasonable. The Chinese Foreign Ministry also denied claims Beijing may be abetting Pyongyang by forcibly repatriating North Koreans trying to flee their country, saying they're considered illegal immigrants. Concerns are rising again here in Korea about Japan's claims to Korea's Dokdo Island after it was found a U.S. congressional think tank uses both the Korean and Japanese names for the rocky island. Our Son Jang-in reports.
The discovery that a U.S. governmental body has been using two names on official maps has reignited concern in Korea over the Dokdo Island, which Korea controls. Japan also claims the island as its territory and has said in the past it will take the matter to the International Court of Justice. This is a map of the Korean peninsula that was published last Saturday in a report released by the U.S. Congressional Research Service titled North Korea, U.S. Relations, Nuclear Diplomacy, and Internal Situation. The second page of the report shows the Korea-controlled Dokdo Island, which are referred to by two names, Dokdo, the name Korea uses, and Takeshima, the name Japan uses. The Research Bureau also used both names on reports released in April and September last year. And in a report it published last August, it referred to Dokdo as the Liancourt Rocks, with the name Takeshima in front of the name Dokdo. National Geographic also uses both names for the island on a map on its website. In related news, the Director General of the Korean Foreign Ministry's Northeast Asian Affairs Bureau, Lee Sang-deok, told his visiting Japanese counterpart Junichi Ihara on Tuesday that Tokyo's misunderstanding of history and provocative remarks are hampering bilateral ties. Lee also urged Tokyo to cancel its upcoming Takeshima Day this weekend, designed to promote Japan's claim to Dokdo. Son Jang-in, Arirang News.
Korea is stepping up efforts toward joining the U.S.-led Trans-Pacific Partnership negotiations by holding a series of preliminary talks with related parties. An official from Seoul's Trade Ministry said Wednesday that Korea and Japan will hold bilateral talks early next month in Japan to check conditions for joining the trade pact. The TPP is an effort by the U.S. to increase its economic presence in the Asia-Pacific region. Negotiations for the trade deal involve 12 countries at the present time. Since expressing its interest in joining the TPP late last year, Korea has already held preliminary bilateral talks with the 11 other nations, including Australia, Canada, and the U.S. The Korean government is rushing to re-engage economically with Iran by giving local firms the green light to engage in business-to-business transactions of humanitarian goods with the Middle Eastern country. Korea's finance ministry says the move will increase the bilateral trade volume by up to $1 billion over the next 12 months. This comes as economic sanctions imposed on Tehran by the international community were partially lifted for 6 months in mid-January after the Iranian government agreed to an interim deal to curb its nuclear activities. Korea's export-driven economy is still being driven by 6 industries which can expect to expand even further in the future. Growth in other industries, however, has stayed rather flat in recent years. Connie Kim reports.
Korean exports are still driven by the 6 industries that power the country's economy, while growth in other industries has remained stagnant. Local market researcher CEO Score said Wednesday the combined annual overseas sales of 133 companies from 2011 through the third quarter of 2013 was more than $421 billion. Of the total, 94% of the company's overseas sales came from Korea's 6 main export industries: IT and electronics, automobiles, construction, petrochemicals, shipbuilding, and steel. During the same period, however, the telecommunications, pharmaceutical, and transportation industries saw their overseas sales remain flat. CEO Score representative Park Ju-gun said the 6 major industries are crucial to the export-driven Korean economy and added that companies need to invest more to stay competitive.
Exports of IT products and automobiles are expected to continue to grow, while it may take the shipbuilding industry, which is especially highly dependent on global economic trends, more time to recover.
Samsung Group had the highest proportion of overseas sales, which represented more than 70% of its total sales from 2011 to 2013, followed by LG and Kumho Asiana. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
Rules for financial companies concerning the collection of personal information will become stricter beginning in April in the wake of last month's massive data leak. Financial authorities said on Wednesday the Financial Supervisory Service and Financial Services Commission will announce comprehensive measures on February 28th. The reforms will focus on what financial firms can and cannot ask new clients when they fill out application forms. The companies will be limited from asking for resident registration numbers online and offline and will have to enlarge the font size on the sheets to make them clearer to customers. New clients will also have to sign or grant approval to the financial firm when divulging their personal information. Taking a look at the stock market action for today, South Korean stocks traded lower as investors shed shares following disappointing economic indicators coming from the U.S. The benchmark Kospi went down 0.2%, while the tech-heavy Kosdaq climbed 4.45 points, and the Korean won exchanged hands at 1,065 won against the greenback. Gold. It's often seen in times of uncertainty as a safe haven. And now weak U.S. and Chinese economic data coupled with emerging market jitters have helped to spur demand for the bullion. For an in-depth look at this phenomenon, we're now joined live via telephone by Dr. Kim Byung-ju, the head of KLMP Consulting and our favorite commentator on this program. Well, thank you for making time for us, Dr. Kim.
Thanks for having me.
Well, gold prices are on the rise again. The obvious question is how fast and why?
Looks like it's pretty fast rising indeed. That's when we're just keeping our eyes on the rise since the beginning of the year. And if we just measure the rise from the beginning of the year, it's like 10% rise. That's a dramatic rise. And they say this is the fastest such a rise in 30 years. But then again, let's not get too excited about this because, last year it was a really low bottom. Last year, the price was about $1,200 per ounce, and now it has reached over $1,300 and going over beyond that and all that. But because the starting point was so low, this 10% rise, even though it's quite a dramatic rise given that period of time, we cannot say that gold price is for sure on the trend of rising. We still need more time on this, but just for now, last week alone, we saw about 4% rise. So that was, in terms of just the short-term rise itself, the pace is accelerating. So many of those global investors who have been keeping their eyes on the gold price, thinking whether we have hit the bottom in terms of its price and all that, there is a certain level of excitement. But as I said, this is a short-term phenomenon, so many eyes are closely watching how long the extent of this rise that we are seeing in the short term will continue on in the future.
Well, like you mentioned, Dr. Kim, it went down and then it goes up and bounces back down. It goes up and down. It's very unpredictable. The fall of gold prices last year, let's talk about that for now, was quite big, wasn't it?
Yeah, indeed. Last year, the fall of gold price was as much as 28%. So that's a dramatic, fall of a key commodity, if you will, key asset for investment. And we didn't get to see such fall for the last about 12 years. Last time we saw such fall was back in 2001. So for the first time in 12 years, we had seen a dramatic fall, and the magnitude, which I said was 28% per year, was the largest since 1981. As you mentioned, gold price has been going, falling and rising, going up and down over several decades. But last year's drop was a big disappointment in the minds of many people, especially because a lot of people were expecting that as the liquidity in the capital market rises, as the cash itself rises, they were indeed, in theory, expecting the rise of gold. But what we got to see, as I mentioned, was about 28% fall.
Right, I guess sometimes we need to decide when we want to be greedy or fearful. It's always hard to find the timing. Well, other than gold, they say some emerging market currencies may soon rise as well.
Oh, yeah, actually, in addition to the fluctuation of the gold prices, many eyes in the investment market are closely watching the emerging market currencies. And now what we are seeing is a British HSBC bank's report saying that actually some of the emerging markets currencies may rise quite fast this year after following a dramatic fall, in recent months. What they're saying, the HSBC report is saying, is that some of the currencies, such as the Mexican peso and the currency in Peru, for instance, and the currency in Poland, for instance, those currencies actually may record a considerable rise this time. There are differences. There are certain currencies that will probably continue to see some weakness, such as what we call those of the fragile five, such as Brazil, India, Indonesia, Turkey, and South Africa. But they're saying investors who are making their bets in currency markets should keep an eye on other currencies because there's a chance for rise of some of the emerging market currencies.
Well, we never know. One day the Fragile Five might become the Fab Five. One can only wish. Well, the U.S. Federal Reserve is rolling back its massive stimulus program, which has set off anxiety about the effects on emerging markets. How can some of these emerging market currencies rise again, in your opinion?
Yeah, that's a fair question right there. The thing is, as I said last year, in theory, because the United States Fed was increasing the liquidity, the currencies in emerging markets were supposed to rise. But now Fed is tightening up their liquidity supply, at least relatively speaking. So most of them should fall. But the thing is, liquidity supply is continuing on in other parts around the world, such as Japan. BOJ has recently announced their willingness to go ahead with further increase of their supply of capital to the market. And then European Central Bank is also, in various ways, will continue on with relaxing measures in terms of supplying more capital to the market. So indeed, for those emerging market currencies that are on a sound, firm foundation, and I think Korea's won is included as one of them as well. So including Korea and some of the currencies of emerging market that has firm foundation may actually have a chance to rise in terms of value this year. And we'll get to see what happens throughout the coming month.
And of course, we'll turn to you for more updates and more pearls of wisdom to share with us. Dr. Kim Byung-ju, head of KLMP Consulting and the Oracle of Arirang, if I might add. We look forward to having you again next time.
Thank you.
The Islamist militant group responsible for Sunday's bus bombing in northeastern Egypt that killed 4 people, including 3 Koreans, has warned all tourists to leave the Sinai Peninsula by Thursday or risk being subject to further attacks. Our Kim Hyun-bin has this report.
The Egyptian government says it is doing all it can to protect tourists in the wake of a threat by an al-Qaeda-linked Islamist militant group for all tourists to leave the country by Thursday or be subject to further attacks. The government said it is not sure of the authenticity of the threat posted on a Twitter account affiliated with the group, but said it has taken extra precautions. Egyptian Prime Minister Hassan al-Blablawi said on state television that the group Ansar Beit al-Maqdis is becoming a threat to foreign tourists in the country. The Islamist group claims to be responsible for the suicide attack on Sunday that killed 4 people, including 3 Koreans and an Egyptian. The Korean government has issued a travel warning for the Sinai Peninsula and is working to find out whether there are still any Korean tourists in the region. The Korean Foreign Ministry says it is doing all it can to uncover the motive for the attack.
We are working with the Egyptian government and the international community to learn the reasons behind the attack.
Korean government officials dispatched to the scene after the attack are currently working to help the Koreans who survived the attack and ensure they get home safely. 15 of them are scheduled to return home on Wednesday, while the other half are in Egypt undergoing treatment. The bodies of the 3 victims will be conveyed back to Korea by their families at a later date. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
Moving on to other parts of our world, violence has returned to Ukraine Tuesday, where at least 21 people have been killed in the worst outbreak of violence since demonstrations erupted against President Viktor Yanukovych. Ukrainian police charged protesters at the capital's Independence Square using rubber bullets, smoke and stun grenades on protesters and clashed with civilians on the barricades surrounding the central Kiev square. Tuesday's clashes began after demonstrators attempted to march on parliament demanding constitutional reform. Yanukovych has met the opposition leader Vitaly Klitschko and is expected to address the nation after his meeting with opposition leaders. But an exact time has not been announced. Chinese President Xi Jinping said he respects Taiwan's social system and lifestyle in a meeting with a former vice president of Taiwan on Tuesday. The meeting between the Chinese president and Taiwan's former vice president Lian Chen, who is now the honorary chairman of Taiwan's Kuomintang Party, follows another round of government-level talks between the 2 countries last week when they agreed to create a permanent communication body. During the meeting on Tuesday, President Xi also said the 2 sides should foster a common understanding of the One China principle, which says there can only be one state called China. The former vice president echoed Xi's remarks, saying cross-strait communications should be conducted under the One China principle. Arirang TV, Korea's only global broadcasting network, will be available across the U.S. via leading broadcast service provider DirecTV starting Thursday. The move gives Arirang a potential audience of 11 million, while viewers will gain another window on Korean culture. Our Eujin Ju has the details.
Arirang TV, which currently reaches more than 112 million households across the globe, will soon be available to a new audience of viewers in the United States. Starting Thursday, the Korean broadcaster will become the first and only Asian channel added to the public interest programming lineup of U.S.-based broadcast satellite service provider DirecTV. Arirang TV will be available on DirecTV channel 2095 across the U.S. to more than half of the channel's 20 million subscribers. While other Asian channels are included in DirecTV's international packages, which requires an extra subscription fee, Arirang TV is part of the English packages that reaches the mainstream U.S. audience. Arirang TV will be providing programs that target the growing Asian American market to further promote Korea and Korean culture in the U.S., ranging from up-to-date news and documentaries to round-the-clock entertainment. To commemorate the launch of the service on Thursday, President Park Geun-hye will be delivering an on-air congratulatory message in which she is expected to express her hope that Arirang TV becomes a bridge between Korea and the U.S., strengthening their friendship and trust. DirecTV is one of the world's leading providers of digital television entertainment services and has a customer base of 20 million in the U.S. and more than 17 million in Latin America through its 295 channels. Eujin Ju, Arirang News.
Time to shift our focus to the world of sports for the latest wins, heartbreaks, and events that have fans around the world brimming with anticipation. We turn to our Lee Tae-ho for Sochi Olympic Games updates.
Good afternoon, everybody. We kick off today's coverage of the Sochi Winter Olympics with a recap of the Day 11 action. And what an action-packed day it was. The ladies of Team Korea have done it once again, and this time it was the dream team of Shim Seok-ki, Park Seung-hee, Kim Ha-rang, and Cho Hae-ri who struck gold in the 3,000-meter relay. And boy, was it done in spectacular fashion. Team Korea in the lead for the majority of the race was overtaken by China, only to have the youngest member Shim Seok-ki overtake the leader in a blazing show of speed with only 2 laps left. Team Korea finished with a time of 4 minutes, 9.49 seconds to take home the gold, which is the first in 8 years in the event, and it's the 5th in 7 Olympic appearances. And there was even more short track action yesterday with the prelims for both the men's 500-meter and the women's 1,000-meter competitions. Before the ladies of Team Korea took to the ice for the relay event, 3 of the 4 members qualified for the individual short track competition as well. The trio of Park Seung-hee, Shim Seok-ki, and Kim Ha-rang all qualified for the quarterfinals for the 1,000-meter short track competition, and yet another shot at adding to Team Korea's total medal count. The men also did well with the duo of Park Se-young and Lee Han-bin both qualifying for the men's 500-meter short track event. Both events wrap up on Saturday, Korea time. And moving on to the ever-intimidating men's 10,000-meter speed skating event, Lee Seung-hoon, who is the defending Olympic champion and Asia's only competitor in the event, went head-to-head with the 10,000-meter event legend Dutch speed skater Sven Kramer. Unfortunately, Lee failed to make it to the podium and finished 4th, while the dominant Dutchman swept the race once again. Jorrit Bergsma took the gold with a new Olympic record time of 12 minutes 44.45 seconds, followed by Sven Kramer taking the silver and Bob de Jong wrapping it up for the Netherlands with the bronze. And now switching gears to a different competition on ice, the highly anticipated women's individual figure skating competition kicks off at midnight Korea time. And like the website of the International Olympic Committee has also so eloquently put it, it's Yeona time. This will be the Korean skater's second and final Olympic appearance. Kim is lined up to skate 5th in Group 3, and she's slated to perform at 2:24 a.m. Korea time. And we'll wrap things up today with a look at what to watch this evening and a look at the current medal standings. I'm Lee Tae-ho, and I'll be back tomorrow for all the latest from the 2014 Sochi Winter Games.
Just 5 days remaining until the curtain comes down on the Sochi Winter Games. More and more attention naturally is being drawn to next Winter Games in the Korean resort town of Pyeongchang. For fans wanting to learn more about the next host city, there is a special place at Olympic Park to get a preview. Our Olympics correspondent Song Ji-sun files this report from Sochi.
The spirit of the Olympics is alive and well in Sochi, but just a few minutes after entering Olympic Park, you can also get a sense of what the 2018 Winter Games will be like.
The Pyeongchang House is just before the main competition venues at the Olympic Park. Athletes and sports fans can get a preview of what the Winter Olympics will look like at Korea's Alpine City less than 4 years from now.
From learning about Pyeongchang's location on the Korean peninsula and experiencing Korean medicine to watching cultural performances every day, visitors can get a better idea of the host city and the nation of the Pyeongchang Winter Olympic Games. The venue is especially popular among Russians who are curious about the city that will take the reins in 4 years.
I think that it will be good Olympic Games and maybe better than now. I hope that I will be in these Olympic Games in Pyeongchang.
And it's not too early to think about Pyeongchang. Athletes who have already wrapped up their games at Sochi are now setting their sights on Pyeongchang, and so are their families.
We're parents of an athlete at these games, and I'm very, very impressed. I mean, obviously, they're quite ready for the Olympics. There's no question about that.
After hitting the 100,000 visitor mark on Saturday, Pyeongchang House is rising as a must-see spot among Olympic fans.
Over 15,000 visitors drop by at the Pyeongchang House a day, meaning 1 out of 5 people in Olympic Park drop by. They get surprisingly interested after viewing the exhibition. And more than 500 Russians have already requested that they'd love to volunteer at the 2018 Pyeongchang Games.
Visitor number 201,800 to the Pyeongchang House, or 2018 with 2 zeros on the end, will win a free flight to and from the Games if the winner wants to volunteer at the 2018 Games. 송지선, Arirang News, Sochi.
And that brings us to the end of our newscast. Thank you for watching.